The bottle hit the marble floor before anyone moved to stop it. It wasn't the sound that made Tae-jin turn. It was the laugh that followed. Low, unguarded, the kind of laugh a person forgets they still have. His security team shifted, his associate mid-sentence. None of it registered. Because across the crowded VIP lounge of Incheon International Airport, standing with a water bottle rolling toward her heels and a 9-year-old boy pulling at her sleeve, was a woman Tae-jin had spent a decade convincing himself he'd forgotten. She hadn't changed. That was the brutal part. She was still her. Sharp eyes, natural hair pulled back, the kind of face that didn't perform anything. She was laughing at the boy now, shaking her head, and the boy was grinning up at her with a crooked, familiar smile. Tae-jin's chest locked. He knew that smile. He'd seen it every morning in the mirror for 33 years. If you've ever stood in a crowded room and seen the person who changed your life, before you were ready, before you had the words, then you already know what happened next inside Tae-jin's body. And if that person was standing next to a child who had your eyes, your jaw, your exact way of tilting his head when something amused him, what would you do? What would you say? And what would you do if you realized, in the space of one breath, that the love you abandoned to save might have spent 10 years raising your son alone? This is that story. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story like this one. Drop a like and leave a comment telling me your city and country. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. Now, let's begin. Zuri Coleman did not believe in signs. She believed in evidence, in documentation, in the kind of truth that could be filed with a court clerk and stamped with a date. She had built her entire professional life, and most of her emotional one, on the principle that feelings were weather and facts were ground. You built on ground. You did not build on weather. Which is why, on the morning of March 14th, when she was trying to manage 3 carry-on bags, 1 overtired child, 1 gate change notification on her phone, and a water bottle that Micah had already knocked over twice, she was not thinking about the past. She was thinking about gate B17 and whether the coffee at the terminal kiosk would be strong enough to justify the line. Micah picked up the bottle, handed it back to her with the solemn face he made when he thought he was being helpful, and then immediately saw something shiny near the duty-free display and started drifting toward it. Micah, I'm just looking. You said that in Toronto and it cost me $40. That was a gift. For yourself. He grinned. That crooked pull at the left side of his mouth that Zuri had been looking at for 9 years and still couldn't decide whether she loved or whether it broke something quiet inside her. Both, usually. At the same time. She caught the bottle before it could roll a second time, shoved it into the outer pocket of her bag, and turned to check the departures board. That's when she felt it. Not a sound, not a word. Just the particular quality of being looked at. Hard, focused, the way a person looks when they're trying to confirm something they cannot believe they're seeing. Zuri had spent enough time in courtrooms and hostile negotiations to know the difference between casual attention and something with weight behind it. She turned. Across the lounge, past a cluster of business travelers and a family arranging luggage near the windows, a man was standing completely still. He was tall, Korean, dark suit, no tie. The kind of stillness that wasn't relaxed but controlled. The stillness of someone who had trained himself not to react. Around him, several other men had arranged themselves at careful distances, the geometry of their positioning. So practiced, it almost looked casual. Almost. Zuri's first coherent thought was that he had the wrong person. People stared sometimes. She was used to it. Black woman traveling alone with a mixed child in Seoul's international terminal. She'd already collected 3 prolonged glances in 40 minutes. She had learned, years ago, how to file that kind of attention into a specific folder in her mind and close the drawer. She looked back at the departures board, but her body knew before her brain finished arguing. Her hands had stopped moving, her breath had gone shallow, and a name had surfaced from somewhere she had locked tight for 10 years. Not dramatically, not in some flood of feeling, but in the flat, certain way that facts arrive when you've been avoiding them long enough. Jay. She turned back. He was still looking at her. And now she could see his face clearly enough to know that the folder she had built, the drawer she had sealed, the entire architecture of distance she had constructed over a decade, was not going to hold. Because it was him. It was Jae Kwon, standing in the VIP lounge of Incheon International Airport, 10 years older, wearing a suit that cost more than her first year's salary, surrounded by men who moved like they were paid to absorb trouble, and looking at her like she was something he had given up expecting to see again. Zuri's hand found Micah's shoulder without her looking down. She pulled him slightly closer. She did not know why. Not yet. Tae-jin's associate, Park Sung-ho, had been speaking for approximately 4 minutes about the Busan port delays when he noticed that his employer had stopped listening. This was unusual enough to make him pause mid-sentence. Tae-jin almost never stopped listening. It was one of the things about him that made certain people in certain rooms very careful about what they said out loud. "Sir." Tae-jin didn't answer. Park followed his gaze across the lounge. He saw a woman, black, American-looking, mid-30s, natural hair, sensible travel clothes. Beside her, a boy of about 9 or 10, tugging at her sleeve with the focused persistence of a child who has identified something interesting and intends to pursue it. The woman was looking back at Tae-jin. Park had worked for the Kwon family for 11 years. He had been present for negotiations that ended careers, and for at least one conversation that ended considerably more than that. He had seen Tae-jin walk into rooms that made hardened men sweat and come out the other side having said exactly 7 words. He had never seen Tae-jin's face do what it was doing right now. "Sung-ho." Tae-jin's voice was level, very level. The kind of level that requires effort. "Cancel the afternoon meeting." "Sir, the Incheon group has been—" "Cancel it." Park canceled it. Tae-jin was already moving. He crossed the lounge with the particular walk he had. Not fast, not slow, each step placed like he owned the ground under it. His security detail shifted to follow, and he stopped them with 2 fingers without turning around. They stopped. He kept walking. Zuri watched him come and did not move. She was calculating. She could feel herself doing it, running the numbers the way she did before every difficult conversation, assessing exits and angles and what she actually had to work with. The problem was that none of her usual frameworks applied here. This wasn't a deposition. This wasn't an adversarial witness. This was a man who had loved her and then disappeared, and now he was 4 feet away. "Zuri." Not a question. He said her name the way you say the name of something you thought you'd lost, with the specific weight of someone who has practiced not saying it and is now saying it anyway. She kept her voice flat. I don't go by Zuri Coleman in professional contexts, but I'm guessing you're not reaching out professionally." Something flickered in his face. Not quite a smile. "No." "Then what are you doing?" He didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he had too many and was working through which one was survivable. Zuri watched his eyes drop to Micah, who had stopped pulling at her sleeve and was now staring up at this stranger with the frank, appraising look he turned on everyone he hadn't categorized yet. Tae-jin looked at the boy, and Zuri watched his face change. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't announce itself. It was small and terrible. The specific expression of a person whose body understands something that their mind is still refusing to process. His jaw tightened. His breathing shifted. His eyes moved across Micah's face in the methodical way of someone who is checking and arriving at the same conclusion every time they check. Micah tilted his head. That crooked half-grin surfaced. Tae-jin's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Mom." Micah tugged at Zuri's sleeve once. "Who's that?" Zuri looked at her son, then at the man standing in front of her. Then at the security detail 10 feet back who were very professionally pretending not to be watching their employer have what appeared to be a private crisis in a public airport. "An old friend," she said. It was the most accurate, dishonest answer she had. She almost walked away. That was the truth of it, and Zuri had never been someone who dressed up the truth. When Tae-jin said, quietly, in the careful voice of a man dismantling a situation 1 word at a time, "Can we talk?" "Not here. Just 5 minutes, somewhere private." Her first instinct was to take Micah's hand and walk to gate B-17 and get on the plane and never let this moment become something that required dealing with. But Micah was looking at Tae-jin with that open, unguarded curiosity he brought to everything. And Tae-jin was looking at Micah with something that Zuri recognized from the mirror on nights when she thought she'd gotten Micah down and could finally fall apart alone. He looked like someone trying very hard not to cry in public. She stayed. They found a quieter corner of the lounge. Tae-jin's people arranged themselves at a distance that was both respectful and completely inescapable. Micah accepted a tablet from one of them, with the pragmatic gratitude of a 9-year-old who has identified entertainment and is not asking questions about its origin, and settled a few feet away. Tae-jin sat across from Zuri. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then, "You look..." "Don't." He stopped. "Don't tell me how I look," she said. "Don't do that. You don't get to do that." "Okay." He folded his hands on the table. She noticed his knuckles, slightly thickened, the hands of someone who hadn't spent 10 years behind a desk. "Okay? How long have you been back in Seoul?" "I never left." The words landed flat. Zuri processed them. "You never left?" "After Nairobi, I came home. I've been here since." "You've been here." She said it again, not because she hadn't heard it, but because she needed to hear herself say it. "For 10 years. In this city." "Yes, yes. And you didn't..." She stopped, started again. "You didn't think about..." "Every day." His voice didn't break, but something in it bent. "I thought about it every day." "That's supposed to mean something to me?" "No, I know it doesn't." Zuri pressed her lips together. Behind her, she could hear Micah making sound effects for whatever he was watching, completely absorbed. She kept her voice low. "You disappeared, Jay. You were gone. No message, no explanation, nothing. I woke up one morning and every trace of you was just..." She stopped again. "I spent 3 months thinking something had happened to you. I filed a report with the university. I called the hospital." Tae-jin was quiet. 3 months, she repeated. "That's how long it took me to understand you were gone on purpose." "I know." "Don't keep saying that. Saying you know isn't the same as having an explanation." He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "My father was killed." The lounge noise continued around them. Announcements, rolling luggage. Somewhere a child was arguing with its parents in Korean. Zuri waited. "He was murdered," Tae-jin said, his voice stripped to something flat and careful. "In Seoul, while I was in Nairobi. The people who did it, they were sending a message. And part of that message was that everyone connected to me was a liability. I was given 12 hours to get on a plane. 12 hours. I couldn't reach you. I couldn't leave any trace. If they found out about you..." He stopped. Seemed to choose his next words with the precision of a man walking across ice. "I was 23. I was terrified. I thought disappearing completely was the only way to keep you safe." Zuri looked at him for a long time. "That's the reason," she said finally. "It's the truth." "I didn't say it wasn't." She kept her voice even. "I asked if that was the reason. And now I'm telling you something. A reason isn't the same as an excuse, and an explanation doesn't close a decade." He nodded. "I know." "You keep saying that." "Because I do. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Zuri. I'm not asking for anything. I just..." He stopped. His eyes moved past her, toward where Micah was sitting, stayed there. "I just needed to look at you, to know you were..." He couldn't finish that sentence. Tried another one. "Are you staying in Seoul?" "I start work here Monday." Something moved through his expression, not quite relief, more complicated. "At the children's organization." She paused. "How do you know that?" "Seoul is smaller than it looks." That should have felt invasive. It did feel invasive. But beneath the invasion was something else she didn't have time to examine, because Micah had appeared at her elbow, tablet tucked under his arm, looking at Tae-jin with the specific alertness of a child who has decided to run an assessment. "Your name's Jay?" he asked. Tae-jin looked at him. "Yes." "My mom said you're an old friend." "We were." A pause. "A long time ago." Micah considered this with the gravity of someone who is 9 and therefore takes all social classifications seriously. "How old?" "Before you were born." Micah tilted his head. That angle. That exact angle. Right side, slight lift of the chin, like a question mark made of a person. Zuri watched Tae-jin go very still. "Are you from Seoul?" Micah asked. "Yes." "Cool. We're gonna live here now." He glanced at his mother. "She says the food is incredible." "It is," Tae-jin said. "Do you know any good places? She always makes me try new stuff and then she eats most of it. Despite herself. Despite everything." Zuri felt the corner of her mouth want to move. She held it flat. Tae-jin smiled. Small, careful, like a man who wasn't sure he was allowed to. I know a few places. You should take us sometime, Micah said, with the guileless directness of a child who has not yet learned that invitations carry consequences. Tae-jin looked at Zuri. Zuri picked up her bag. We have a flight to catch, she said. She took Micah's hand and stood. Tae-jin stood with her, that automatic old reflex. And for a moment they were just two people at the same altitude, close enough that she could see the years in his face clearly. The jaw she remembered. The eyes she'd drawn in the margins of her notebooks once, when she was 20 and didn't know better. She had not told him yet. She was not going to tell him. Not here. Not like this, with bodyguards standing in her peripheral vision and her son eating cereal bars 2 feet away. But when she turned to go, Micah twisted back and waved. Bye, Jay. And Tae-jin raised one hand, and his face did that thing again. That quiet, wrecked, unguarded thing. And Zuri walked her son toward gate B-17 with her heartbeat loud enough to hear, carrying a secret that had just become significantly heavier than it was 30 minutes ago. Behind her, Kwon Tae-jin stood in the middle of Incheon's VIP lounge and did not move for a very long time. Park Sung-ho approached carefully. Sir, should I find out everything about a woman named Zuri Coleman? Tae-jin's voice was quiet, precise. She works for an international children's protection organization. She arrived in Seoul today. He paused. And she has a son. Park waited. He's approximately 9 years old, Tae-jin said. Find out his birthday. Park looked at his employer's face. He did not ask why. He already understood. Park Sung-ho delivered the information at 7:43 the following morning. He laid a single printed page on Tae-jin's desk. Clean, no headers, just facts organized the way Tae-jin preferred them. Zuri Amara Coleman. Born September 3rd, 1994, Atlanta, Georgia. Mother, Dr. Amara Coleman, retired pediatrician. Father, James Coleman, deceased. Undergraduate degree from the University of Nairobi. Law degree from Columbia. Admitted to the New York bar at 26. Recruited 8 months ago by the International Children's Protection Alliance, effective date of Seoul posting, March 15th. Current address, a furnished apartment in Mapogu, arranged by the organization. Park cleared his throat. The boy. Tae-jin was already reading. Micah James Coleman. Born December 9th, 2015. Father listed on the birth certificate as... Park stopped. Unknown, Tae-jin said. Yes, sir. Tae-jin set the page down on his desk. He pressed 2 fingers against his mouth and looked at the wall for a moment that stretched long enough to make Park uncomfortable. Outside the window, Seoul was already loud, traffic building on the bridge, a delivery truck reversing somewhere below. The city assembling itself into another day with no interest in anyone's private devastation. December 9th, Tae-jin said. Yes. 9 months after March. He did not need Park to confirm the arithmetic. He had been doing it since the airport, in the car ride home, through the sleepless hours between 2 and 5 in the morning when the calculation kept arriving at the same answer no matter how many times he ran it. Is there anything else you need? Park asked. No. A pause. Yes. Find out her office location and her regular schedule, discreetly. Of course. And Sung-ho. Tae-jin finally looked up. No one else in this building hears a word of this. Not my uncle, not Jaewon. No one. Park looked at his employer's face, at the specific quality of stillness there. Not the dangerous stillness of a man planning something, but the worst kind. The stillness of a man sitting with something he cannot yet hold. Understood, sir. He left. Tae-jin sat alone with the paper and the arithmetic and the crooked smiling boy who had waved goodbye at gate B-17 and did not move for a long time. Zuri's first week in Seoul was the kind of exhausting that sits in the bones rather than the muscles. The apartment was fine. The organization's Seoul office was located in a clean building near Yeouido, the kind of place that smelled like new carpet and institutional optimism. Her supervisor, a Belgian woman named Dr. Lena Ferris, who wore reading glasses on a chain and had the focused warmth of someone who had seen too much to be naive about it, walked her through the case inventory on her first day with the brisk efficiency of a person who knows their new colleague needs facts, not comfort. The trafficking case was the heaviest one in the active file. Mikhail Volkov, Russian national, 51, operating through a network of shell companies registered in Busan and Vladivostok, with financial tendrils in at least 4 other jurisdictions. The organization had been tracking his operation for 14 months. The Seoul DA's office had expressed interest but no commitment. Interpol had a file that was technically open and practically dormant. There were 2 surviving witnesses willing to talk, one in protective housing in Incheon, one who had recanted after what the case notes described, with careful bureaucratic language, as a change in personal circumstances. Zuri understood what that meant. Someone had gotten to the second witness before the case did. She took the file home. She read it at the kitchen table while Micah slept, with a cup of coffee going cold beside her laptop, and by midnight she had 3 pages of margin notes and a growing feeling in her chest that was not quite dread and not quite determination, but somewhere between the two. The feeling she got at the beginning of cases that mattered. She was 2 pages into the financial documentation when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, Seoul area code. She almost didn't answer. Then she did. Ms. Coleman. The voice was Korean accented, male, careful. Not Tae-jin's voice. Younger. My employer would like to arrange a meeting at your convenience. He apologizes for the irregular contact and understands completely if— Who is your employer? Zuri said. A brief pause. Mr. Kwan. She sat with that for a moment. The financial document was still open in front of her, a column of wire transfers she hadn't finished tracing. Tell Mr. Kwan, she said, that I'm busy. She hung up. She sat for another minute. Then she closed the financial document and stared at the wall. She had known, walking away from that airport lounge, that it wasn't finished. You didn't spend 9 years with someone's absence as a fixture of your daily life, and then accidentally bump into them in an international terminal and have it be finished. The world was not constructed that way. She was not constructed that way, regardless of how much she might prefer it. But the call annoyed her in a specific way she needed to examine. He had her number, which meant he had run her, which meant between yesterday and tonight, Tae-jin, or whoever worked for him, had gathered enough information to locate her personal phone. That was not the behavior of an old university friend trying to reconnect. That was something else. She picked up the file again, found the photograph section. Volkov's primary operation appeared to route through a logistics company based in Incheon, cargo handling, customs facilitation, the kind of business that existed to move things across borders without anyone looking too carefully. Logistics, she thought. She thought about what Tae-jin had said in the airport. Seoul is smaller than it looks. She closed the file. He came to her office. She hadn't agreed to a meeting, which meant either he'd decided that her refusal was a negotiating position rather than an answer, or he was the kind of man who wasn't accustomed to being refused. Probably both. He arrived at 11:15 on a Wednesday, 3 days after the phone call, while she was between 2 meetings and standing at the small table outside her office, eating a sandwich she didn't have time to sit down for. Her colleague Jinna appeared in the hallway doorway with the expression of someone who has encountered something unexpected and is trying to decide how alarmed to be. There's a man downstairs asking for you. He doesn't have an appointment. He said to tell you his name is Jay. Zuri finished chewing, swallowed, set down the sandwich. Tell him I'll be down in 10 minutes. She took 20. Not to make a point. She actually needed the time, standing at the small bathroom mirror with the water running, having a very short, very direct internal conversation about what she was and wasn't going to let happen. She was here for work. Micah was enrolled in school 3 blocks from the apartment. Her life had a structure now, a new structure that was still fragile the way new things are, and she was not going to let one encounter in an airport destabilize what had taken 2 years of planning to build. She walked downstairs. He was standing in the lobby, alone. No security visible, though she suspected that was a performance. He was in a dark jacket, no tie again, and he looked like he hadn't slept any better than she had. He had coffee from somewhere. He was holding it with both hands, the way you hold something warm when you're cold, in a way that has nothing to do with the temperature. You didn't call ahead, she said. You didn't answer the call. That was a different kind of not calling ahead. He looked at her. Can we talk somewhere that isn't a lobby? I have a meeting in 40 minutes. I know a place 2 blocks from here. We can walk. She looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up her coat from the front desk hook and walked past him toward the door. The place was a small Korean lunch spot, the kind with plastic stools and laminated menus, and a woman in the back who didn't look up when they sat down. 3 other tables occupied, ordinary in every way. Zuri looked around and then looked at Tae-jin. You picked this on purpose, she said. I come here sometimes when I don't want to be anywhere that matters. He sat across from her. Nobody is watching us. Your people are outside, at a distance. That's still watching. He conceded this with a slight tilt of his head. The woman came over. He ordered 2 coffees without asking, which Zuri noted but let pass because she needed the coffee, and arguing about it would be petty in a way that didn't serve her. I want to talk about Micah, he said. I know. I want to know. He stopped, started differently. The birthday, December 9th. You already ran me, not a question. Yes. So you already know. I know the arithmetic, he said. I need to hear it from you. Zuri wrapped both hands around the coffee cup the woman had set down. It was hot and slightly burnt, and she was grateful for something concrete to hold. What exactly are you asking me, Tae-jin? His jaw tightened at the name. The real name, not the Nairobi one. Is he mine? The lunch spot's kitchen made noise behind them. Someone at another table was laughing at something on their phone. Yes, Zuri said. He closed his eyes. Just for a second. 1 second of something raw and uncontrolled, and then it was gone and his face was level again. But she had seen it. She'd been watching for it. I found out 6 weeks after you left, she said. I was still trying to figure out where you'd gone. I'd filed the report with the university. She stopped. This was not the time to reconstruct that particular disaster. I was alone. I went home to Atlanta. My mother helped me. I came back to finish my degree when Micah was 4 months old. You never tried to find me. Something sharpened in her voice. I tried for 3 months, Tae-jin. After that I stopped, because you were clearly gone, and I had a child coming, and my energy had to go somewhere useful. I raised my son. I finished my education. I built a life. She said it without heat because heat would imply this was emotional, and she was not going to let it be emotional. And Micah is 9 years old and has never needed a father who didn't want to be found. I didn't know. I know you didn't know. She set her cup down. I'm not blaming you for not knowing. I'm telling you that we built a life without you in it, and it is a good life, and I am not going to let you walk back into it and destabilize it because you feel guilty. I don't feel guilty. His voice was quiet, rough at the edges. I feel like I missed years of my son's life. You did. I want to meet him, properly. I know. He stopped himself, recalibrated. What do you want, Zuri? Tell me what the boundary is. She looked at him. In the harsh daylight of a cheap lunch spot, with the kitchen noise and the smell of doenjang and the laminated menu between them, she studied the face of the man she had once loved and tried to find the version of herself that had loved him, the 20-year-old who'd shared her notes with a quiet Korean student in a Nairobi economics lecture, who had sat with him on the roof of the student housing building, watching the city lights and not needed to fill the silence. She found her. She also found 10 years of silence on top of her. One meeting, Zuri said. I'll introduce you as Jay, an old friend from Nairobi. We'll see how Micah responds. We don't tell him anything until I decide that you're... She searched for the word. Safe? He said. Stable, she said. Until I decide you're stable enough to be in his life without leaving again. He looked at her for a moment. Something in his expression that she couldn't fully read. Okay, he said. Just like that? I've been told my terms before, he said. I know what it sounds like when they're not negotiable. She picked up her coffee. Good. The meeting happened on a Saturday at a park in Mapogu. Micah, who had been told he was meeting an old friend of his mother's for lunch, arrived at the park with the mild interest of a child who has been given no strong reason to feel anything about a situation yet, but was wearing his soccer cleats because he'd been kicking a ball against the apartment wall for an hour and hadn't bothered to change. And he had a juice box in his hand and a general air of a person willing to assess but not yet committed. Tae-jin was already there when they arrived. He was sitting on a bench near the fountain, not surrounded by security, not in the dark suit. Jeans and a plain jacket, which Zuri suspected had been a deliberate choice. He looked up when they came through the park gate and stood immediately, that automatic thing, and then seemed to catch himself and sat back down, which Zuri found unexpectedly human. Hey, Jay, Micah said, like they were resuming something. He settled onto the other end of the bench with the juice box. You know any places with good jjajangmyeon? Mom made me eat bibimbap 3 times this week. Micah, I liked it. I'm just saying variety is important. Tae-jin looked at the boy. Something in his face was doing that thing again. That careful, wrecked, too much at once thing. But he managed it. I know a place in Mapo, best jjajangmyeon in the district. The noodles are handmade. Micah's interest sharpened noticeably. Handmade how? The owner pulls them. Takes him about 15 minutes for a full batch. Can we watch? If you ask him nicely and you're willing to stand at the kitchen window for 15 minutes. Micah considered this with the solemn face. That's worth it. Zuri sat on a separate bench nearby and watched them. She had prepared herself for this, or tried to. She had run through several versions of how it might go. Micah uninterested, Micah overwhelmed, Micah picking up on something and asking difficult questions, Tae-jin saying too much or too little. What she had not prepared for was the version where they simply started talking. Not carefully, not with the heavy self-consciousness of a first meeting with stakes, but in the direct, practical, low-formality way of two people who have compatible temperaments and nothing to prove to each other yet. Tae-jin asked about the soccer cleats. Micah explained about the tournament. Tae-jin mentioned taekwondo. Micah, who had been wanting to learn martial arts for 2 years and had been told repeatedly that he needed to finish one extracurricular before starting another, leaned forward with the expression of someone who has located an ally. You actually do taekwondo? Since I was 7. Could you teach me? Micah, Zuri said, I'm asking. He looked at her with the eyes of a child who knows when he is technically within the rules. Can I ask? Tae-jin glanced at Zuri. She gave nothing. Ask your mom, he said. If she says it's okay, I'll show you the basics. Micah spun on the bench toward her. She held up one hand. One thing at a time. But she noticed that Tae-jin had deferred to her, had done it immediately, without negotiating. She filed that away. They walked to the noodle place. Micah watched the owner pull noodles through the kitchen window with the focused attention he gave to things he genuinely found fascinating, which was most things. Tae-jin stood beside him and translated occasionally when the owner said something. Zuri sat at the table and watched both of them and ate most of Micah's dumpling appetizer. It was a good afternoon. That was the problem. It was a genuinely good afternoon, and Zuri did not trust good afternoons that arrived this easily. The flowers came the following Monday. Not dramatic, not a tower of roses or anything designed to overwhelm. A small arrangement, muted colors, set on her desk when she arrived at the office. The card said only, for a good afternoon. Jae-jinna looked at them with undisguised interest. Secret admirer? Old friend, Zuri said for the second time. She put the card in her desk drawer and went to work. The Volkov file had developed since Friday. The escaped victim, a woman the case notes identified only as Source A, currently in protective housing in Incheon, had made contact again through the organization's secured channel, indicating she had additional photographs she hadn't felt safe sharing during the initial interview. Zuri had scheduled a second meeting for Thursday. Dr. Ferris had reinforced twice that Zuri was to conduct the meeting with a colleague present, that under no circumstances was she to have contact with the source alone, and that any evidence gathered was to be logged immediately through the secure system. Zuri had agreed to all of this. She was also aware, reviewing the logistics company documentation again, that the cargo handling operation Volkov used to move people through Incheon looked very similar in structure, filing patterns, customs contacts, port access scheduling, to several other Incheon-based logistics operations she'd seen referenced in Korean business records. The kind of structural similarity that either meant the whole industry operated this way or meant something less benign. She opened a browser window and typed Korean Logistics Group. The first results were corporate, clean. The company had been founded 26 years ago by Kwon Hyun-soo. Deceased, she found in a secondary result, murdered in what the archived article described as a home invasion 7 years prior, though the phrasing had the carefully managed quality of journalism that knows more than it's saying. She scrolled. A 2017 archived article from an investigative outlet, small, since dormant, mentioned the Kwon Logistics Group. In the context of a broader piece about Incheon port operations and questions about certain regulatory exemptions. In paragraph 7, the article referenced a confidential government investigation identifying Kwon Tae-jin as the suspected operational head of what it described, with careful hedge language, as an organization believed to be engaged in activities beyond its registered corporate functions. Zuri read that paragraph 3 times. Then she sat back. The flowers were on her desk, small and muted, the color of something that was trying not to be obvious. She thought about the way the restaurants emptied when he walked in, the men at careful distances, the way Park Sung-ho had her phone number the night after the airport. She thought about Micah watching noodles being pulled through a kitchen window, leaning slightly toward Tae-jin, laughing at something he said. She closed the browser window. She opened it again. She found the name Mikhail Volkov in the article's comment section, not in the article itself, but in a comment thread that had apparently existed before the outlet shut down, where someone with no apparent profile had written a single line. Volkov moves through Kwon territory because Kwon lets him. She stared at that line. Then she picked up her phone, opened her messages, found the number Tae-jin had sent his own contact through the day after he'd had his assistant call her. She typed, "We need to talk. Not at the park." His response came in 40 seconds. "Tell me where." She started to type a location, stopped, looked at the flowers, looked at the browser window still sitting open with the article half visible. She thought about Micah, about the 9 years she'd spent answering, "Where's my dad?" with an age-appropriate version of the truth that got harder to sustain as he got older and smarter. About how easily her son had leaned toward this man on a bench by a fountain. She thought about a line in the trafficking file. Volkov's organization has repeatedly demonstrated the capacity to identify and neutralize threats before they reach prosecutorial stage. She closed the browser. She typed the location. She hit send. And 3 blocks away, at that moment, a man Zuri didn't recognize stepped out of a doorway across the street from her office building, looked up at her window for exactly 2 seconds, and walked away. She didn't see him. She was already putting on her coat. They met at a coffee shop in Uedo. Public, busy, her choice. Tae-jin arrived before her and had already chosen a table toward the back, which told her something about how he moved through spaces. She sat down, did not take off her coat. He noticed that and said nothing. "I looked you up," she said. He was quiet. Kwon Logistics, the 2019 article, the investigation. She watched his face. "You want to tell me what they found?" It was inconclusive. The article or the investigation? Both. He picked up his coffee, set it down without drinking. "There are things about my family's business that are complicated." "How complicated?" "Complicated enough that this isn't a conversation I can have in a coffee shop." "Then we're done talking," she said, and started to stand. "Zuri." She stopped. "Sit down," he said. Not a command. Something more tired than that. "Please." She sat. He looked at his hands for a moment, then at her. "The Kwon family has operated outside the law," he said, very quietly, "for a long time, since before I was born. My father built an organization. When he was killed, it passed to me." A pause. "I run a criminal syndicate. I have run it for 10 years. Illegal gambling, protection arrangements, smuggling, not everything. There are things I won't touch." The coffee shop was loud around them. No one at the adjacent tables was paying attention. Zuri said, "And Volkov?" Something shifted in his expression. "What do you know about Volkov?" "Enough." "Zuri?" "I'm investigating his trafficking operation," she said. "That's my case. I'm an international children's protection attorney, and his organization is moving children through your port." Her voice stayed level. She made it stay level. "So when I find a comment online saying Volkov moves through Kwon territory because Kwon lets him, I need you to tell me if that's true." His jaw was tight. "It's more complicated than—" "Yes or no, Tae-jin?" A silence. "We have an arrangement," he said. "My territory, his access, in exchange for certain considerations." The word arrangement landed like something being dropped. Zuri stood up. "Zuri, you told me you disappeared 10 years ago to protect me from your world." Her voice was controlled, but her hands had gone cold. "And then you walked back into my life and brought your world directly to our son." "I didn't know about Micah. That does not matter right now." She picked up her bag. "I want you to stay away from us. Both of us." "There are people who already know who you are," he said. His voice was different now, urgent, stripped of the careful register. "If you continue this investigation and they connect you to me, don't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you that this situation is more dangerous than you understand, and I need you to—" "You need me to stop?" She looked at him. You need me to stop investigating the people trafficking children through your port? He closed his eyes. That is not what I said. It's what you meant. She walked out. Outside on the street, the March air was cold and sharp. She walked 1 block, 2, before she slowed down enough to let the adrenaline settle. Around her soul moved with its ordinary indifference, foot traffic and delivery bikes and the sound of music coming from somewhere on the floor above a convenience store. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. The message was from a number she didn't have saved. No contact name, just a photograph. In the photograph, Micah was walking out of his school's front gate. The message below it read, "Stop investigating." Zuri stood on a Yowido sidewalk with the city moving around her and looked at a photograph of her son and felt the world contract into something very small and very cold. She thought about calling the police. She thought about the second witness who had recanted after a change in personal circumstances. She thought about Tae-jin sitting at a table in a coffee shop telling her that the situation was more dangerous than she understood. Her hands were shaking. She stopped them. She put the phone in her pocket and kept walking, and with every step she took, she understood more clearly that she had arrived at the exact point where all her professional experience and legal training and careful, evidence-based approach to the world had run out of road. The men who had just threatened her son were connected to the most powerful criminal organization in Seoul, and the only person she knew with the power to stop them was the man she had just walked away from. The man who had chosen his empire over her once, who ran a criminal syndicate, who had an arrangement with the people trafficking children through his port. The man who was also her son's father. She stopped walking, pulled out her phone, found Tae-jin's number, started to type. She typed 4 words and deleted them. Typed 3 different ones and deleted those 2. The sidewalk was getting colder. A delivery bike swerved past her close enough that she had to step back, and she barely registered it. Her thumb was hovering over Tae-jin's name in her contacts, and her brain was running 2 arguments simultaneously. The professional one, which said that contacting a known criminal syndicate head for personal protection was a catastrophic compromise of her case and her integrity, and the one underneath that, which was not professional at all, and said simply, "That is a photograph of my child." The second argument won. She typed, "They sent me a photograph of Micah leaving school. I need to talk to you. Now." She hit send before she could think about it further. His response came in 19 seconds. Not a text. A call. She answered. "Where are you?" His voice was different from the coffee shop, flat, operational. "Yowido, near the river. Don't move." A brief pause. She could hear him speaking to someone else in Korean, fast and low. "I'm sending someone to you. A woman. Her name is Seo Yuna. She'll show you her ID. Go with her." "I'm not going anywhere with a stranger." "Zuri." The flatness in his voice cracked slightly at the edges. Just slightly. "They photographed my son leaving school. This is not the moment for argument, please." She stood on the sidewalk. "Fine," she said. Seo Yuna arrived in 4 minutes in a plain gray sedan, showed identification that looked legitimate and probably was, and drove Zuri through 20 minutes of Seoul traffic without saying anything beyond "seatbelt, please." She was mid-30s, short hair, the kind of face that gave nothing away, and she drove with the specific competence of someone who was thinking about 3 things simultaneously, and none of them was small talk. They arrived at a building in Mapogu. Not the corporate tower Zuri had half expected, but a narrower building, older, the kind that had been renovated once and was considering a second round. Ground floor looked like a trading company. The upper floors were something else. Tae-jin was already there when Yuna brought her up. I was standing at a window overlooking the street below, jacket off, phone in hand, and he turned when she came in with the look of a man who has been managing several crises at once and is now prioritizing. "Show me the message," he said. She handed him the phone. He looked at the photograph of Micah. Something moved across his face, brief, controlled, but she saw it. He handed the phone to a man standing by the door without looking away from her. "Trace the number," he said in Korean. The man left. "You know who sent it," Zuri said. "I have a strong idea. Volkov." He didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either, which was confirmation enough. He walked to the table, pulled out a chair, and said, "Sit down." "I'll stand." He looked at her, made a decision, sat down himself, which was either respect for her autonomy or a practical understanding that she was not going to be managed right now, possibly both. "How did they connect Micah to me?" she said. My organization's case is sealed. My witness meetings are confidential. How does Volkov know my son's school schedule? Because Volkov has people inside multiple institutions in this city, Tae-jin said. Municipal offices, port authority, certain legal channels. He has been operating here for 4 years and he has spent that time building infrastructure. A pause. And because you were seen with me. The sentence arrived quietly and sat between them. Zuri worked through the implication. He surveils you. He watches the people around me, yes. It's mutual. His voice was dry. When you came to the coffee shop, if someone was watching the building, I walked to a coffee shop and had a conversation, and now my son is being threatened. She kept her voice level. It cost her. Because I was seen with you. Yes. So you put him at risk just by knowing us. Zuri, I need you to tell me something true right now, she said. Clearly. Not complicated, not arrangements, not qualified in 3 different directions. Can you keep Micah safe? Tae-jin was quiet for a moment. Then, yes. Are you certain? I am never certain of anything, he said. But I have more resources than Volkov in this city. I know where his people are, and I will put every one of those resources between him and our son. He said our son without hesitation, without performance, like it was simply the accurate word. That I can promise you. She looked at him for a long time. Micah needs to be moved, she said. I have a place. Somewhere Volkov doesn't know about. Several. I want to see it first. Of course. She picked up her bag. I'm still not dropping the investigation. His jaw tightened. I know. I need you to understand that. Whatever you're about to do, whatever arrangements you're going to rearrange, my investigation continues. I'm not going to stop because someone threatened my child. I'm going to stop those people. She looked at him steadily. The question is whether you're going to help me or be in my way. Tae-jin held her gaze. Something settled in his expression. Not agreement exactly, not yet, but something adjacent to it. The look of a man updating his understanding of who he is dealing with. Let's go get Micah, he said. Micah was at school, in the middle of what his teacher later described as a very focused argument about whether the Korean War counted as a draw. I was fine. He was completely fine, sitting in a classroom being 9 years old in the specific oblivious way of children who have not yet been told that the world has sharp edges. Zuri stood outside the school, watching through the window, while Tae-jin's people quietly arranged themselves around the building's perimeter, and she breathed through the specific terror of a parent who is looking at her child from 20 feet away and feeling the distance between safe and not safe as a physical thing. She picked Micah up early, told him it was a surprise afternoon off. He was suspicious immediately. You never take me out early? Today I am. Did something happen? She looked at him. 9 years old and already reading rooms. She had done that, partly, raised him to pay attention, to notice when adult faces were doing things they weren't saying. Right now she was regretting it. Everything's fine, she said. I just thought we could use a change of scenery. He accepted this with the look of someone who doesn't believe it, but has calculated that pushing will not get him better information. A negotiator in miniature. She had absolutely done that. The safe house was a 2-floor apartment in a quiet part of Eunpyeong-gu. Clean, comfortable. Nothing institutional about it. Tae-jin had had someone stock the kitchen, there was a television, and the building's ground floor had 4 of his people in it who were dressed like ordinary residents. Micah walked in, looked around, looked at Tae-jin, and said, Are we hiding from someone? We're just staying somewhere different for a few days, Zuri said. Micah looked at Tae-jin again. Does this have to do with your security guys? Tae-jin crouched down to Micah's level. Zuri watched him do it, watched him consciously bring himself to the boy's height, not talking down, not performing comfort. There are some people I need to deal with for work. Until that's done, I want to make sure you and your mom are somewhere I can find you easily. Is that okay with you? Micah thought about this with his grave, systematic face. Are we in danger? No, Tae-jin said. Not while I know where you are. It was the honest version of reassurance. Not everything is fine, but I'm paying attention. Micah seemed to accept the distinction. He nodded once, picked up his backpack and said, Okay, but I need Wi-Fi. It's already set up, Tae-jin said. Password? Written on the router. Micah went to find the router. Zuri watched him go and then looked at Tae-jin, still at Micah's height, now straightening. She didn't say anything, Neither did he. There wasn't language for the specific exchange that had just happened. The two of them, standing in a safe house watching their son ask about Wi-Fi, the absurdity and the terror of it existing simultaneously. She went back to the office the next day. Dr. Ferris met her at the door with an expression that said something had happened and none of it was good. She brought Zuri into her office, closed the door, and set a single sheet of paper on the desk between them. It was a formal complaint, filed with the organization's International Oversight Board against Zuri. The allegation was unprofessional conduct, specifically that Zuri had made unauthorized contact with a subject connected to the Volkov investigation. Zuri read it twice, then, "This is fabricated." "I know. Someone filed a false complaint against me." "I know that too." Dr. Ferris removed her reading glasses and set them on the desk with the precise care of someone who is managing a level of anger that doesn't benefit from being performed. "What I need you to tell me is whether there is any version of this complaint, any element of it, that touches something real." Zuri thought about the coffee shop, about Tae-jin across the table from her. "I met with someone socially," she said carefully. "Someone who has a peripheral connection to the logistics sector. It was a personal meeting, not related to the case." "Who is this person?" "Someone I knew 10 years ago." Ferris looked at her. "Is the complaint going to find anything if it goes to a formal review?" "No," Zuri said, which was technically true. A social meeting between former acquaintances was not discoverable misconduct. "Then we fight it," Ferris said. "But Zuri—" She picked up her glasses again, turned them over in her hands. "The timing of this complaint is not coincidental. Someone filed this within 48 hours of your second Source A meeting request. Someone who knows your schedule." Zuri had already thought of that. She was trying not to think too hard about what it implied, that the complaint wasn't designed to remove her from the case. It was designed to distract her, to consume her time and attention, and force the organization to slow down while Volkov's people did something else. "Where's Source A now?" she asked. Ferris's expression shifted. "That's the other thing." She opened a folder, a second sheet of paper, a report from the protective housing facility in Incheon. Source A, the escaped victim, the woman with the photographs, had left the facility the previous night, voluntarily, according to the log. She had signed herself out at 11:47 p.m., leaving with one bag, and had not returned. Zuri stared at the report. "We think she was contacted," Ferris said. "We don't know how. The facility's communication should have been secure." "Should have been. Yes." Zuri sat back. The complaint on the desk, the missing witness, the photograph of Micah on her phone. 48 hours and the entire infrastructure of the case had shifted beneath her. "The photographs she brought us in the first meeting," Zuri said. "We still have those? Logged and secured. I need to look at them again." "I'll pull them." Ferris paused. "There's something else. In the photograph set you reviewed last week, the background images from Volkov's property, you flagged a man from Tae-jin's, from someone's security detail." Zuri went very still. "I didn't flag anyone from anyone's security detail," she said. "I noted an unidentified individual." "I know, but our investigative support team ran a facial recognition pass this morning." Ferris turned over a third sheet. A photograph, blown up, grainy from the enhancement, but clear enough. A man in a dark jacket standing at the edge of a room that was clearly part of Volkov's property. Standing there with the comfortable geometry of someone who was not uncomfortable being there. Zuri recognized him, not from the Volkov file, from the airport, from the park in Mapogu, from the careful distance he maintained at every location she'd seen Tae-jin at. Park Sung-ho, Tae-jin's closest associate. The man who had delivered her information and arranged her phone contact and driven the logistics of everything the Kwan organization did that required someone discreet and reliable. Park Sung-ho, standing in a room on Volkov's property, not at the perimeter, not as an observer. Standing inside, with the body language of a man who has been there before and expects to be there again. Zuri looked at the photograph for a long time. "When was this taken?" she asked. Her voice came out level. She didn't know how. 3 weeks ago, Ferris said, "before you arrived in Seoul." 3 weeks ago. Before the airport, before the park, before the safe house in Eunpyeong-gu, where her son was currently staying under Kwon syndicate protection. She thought about Tae-jin in the coffee shop. We have an arrangement. My territory, his access. She thought about how she had pushed him, the people trafficking children through your port, and how his answer had been that it was complicated. She thought about how quickly he had moved when she told him about Micah, how immediately he had produced a safe house, a driver, a perimeter of men, how frictionless all of it had been. She thought about something that had been sitting at the edge of her mind since the coffee shop, and that she had been refusing to look at directly. The possibility that Tae-jin's urgency to protect Micah was not only about fatherhood, the possibility that a man who ran a criminal syndicate and had an arrangement with Volkov might have reasons beyond love for wanting her son in a location only he controlled. She stood up. I need the full photograph set, she said. All of it. And I need our secure server logs for the past 3 weeks. Every access point for the source A file. Zuri, someone gave Volkov access to our witness. She was already moving toward the door. That means someone with access to this organization's secure systems made a choice. I need to know who and when. She stopped with her hand on the doorframe. And I need you to pull every piece of documentation we have on the Kwon Logistics Group's Incheon port operations for the last 18 months. Ferris looked at her carefully. Are you telling me there's a connection between Kwon and Volkov? Zuri looked at the photograph on the desk. Park Sung-ho. 3 weeks ago. Inside. I'm telling you I need to know how deep it goes, she said. She went back to her desk, closed her office door, sat down and put both hands flat on the desk surface and breathed. She had put her son in a safe house run by the Kwon syndicate. She had trusted Tae-jin. Not fully, not without reservation, but enough. Enough to go with his driver, enough to let Micah see him crouch down and speak plainly about danger and say, "Well, I know where you are." Enough to feel, under the fear, that specific old warmth she had sworn she wasn't going to feel. And now she was looking at a photograph of his most trusted man inside Volkov's operation. She picked up her phone, found Tae-jin's number, stared at it. If she called him now and confronted him, she would show her hand. If he was involved, if the arrangement went deeper than port access, if Kwon and Volkov were operating more closely than anyone had understood, then warning him meant losing any element of surprise. If she didn't call him, Micah was in a safe house that only the Kwon syndicate knew about. She called. It rang 4 times. Then, Zuri, I need you to meet me. She kept her voice carefully neutral, gave him nothing in the tone. Not the office, not a coffee shop. Somewhere you choose. I don't care where, but tonight. A brief silence. She could not read it. Is everything tonight, Tae-jin? 7 o'clock, he said. I'll send you the address. She hung up. She spent the remaining hours of the afternoon in the photograph archive, going through every image source A had brought them, and in the third folder, images she had reviewed once, quickly, on her first day, she found it. Not Park Sung-ho this time. Something else. In a photograph taken inside what appeared to be an administrative room at Volkov's primary property. A photograph that had been logged as low priority, background detail, no identifiable individuals. There was a document visible on a table, partially obscured, taken at an angle, but clear enough that she could read the header. Kwon Logistics Group, Incheon Terminal Operations, Authorization Reference KTJ 2024-11, KTJ, Kwon Tae-jin, his personal authorization code. She found the format in the Logistics Group's publicly filed corporate documents in 12 minutes. Personal authorization references formatted with the initialing officer's initials followed by the year and sequence number. This was not an arrangement between organizations. This was a document authorizing specific operational access, signed with Tae-jin's reference code, sitting on a table in a room inside Volkov's property. She sat with that for a very long time. Then she gathered the photograph, copied it to the secure server, logged it with timestamp and discovery notation, and closed the folder. 7 o'clock. She had 3 hours. The address he sent was a restaurant in Yongsan, private, upstairs, the kind of place where rooms had doors that closed. She arrived at 6:58 and was shown upstairs by a man who did not introduce himself and deposited her in a small room with a table set for 2 and a view of the Han River going dark through the window. Tae-jin arrived 2 minutes later. He came in and sat across from her and looked at her face, and something in his expression shifted, The particular shift of a person who knows that the conversation they are entering is not the conversation they were expecting. What happened? He said. Zuri set her phone on the table. On the screen, the blown-up photograph. Park Sung-ho, inside Volkov's property. Tae-jin looked at it. He looked at it for long enough that she knew it was not a surprise. That was the part that landed hardest. Not anger, not shock. The absence of shock. "When were you going to tell me?" she said. "It's not. Please don't say it's complicated." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked 10 years older. Sung-ho has been managing the Volkov interface since before I took control of the organization. He was my father's man before he was mine. The arrangement predates me. He was in that room 3 weeks ago. I know. You know, there are elements of the arrangement that He stopped. That I have not fully dismantled. Elements. She kept her voice very even. Like the part where your lieutenant has access to the property where Volkov is running a trafficking operation. The trafficking is separate from... Is it? She leaned forward, not raising her voice, keeping it low and precise because she was an attorney and she knew that volume was not the same as force. Because I have a document in your organization's filing format with your personal authorization code on it, sitting on a table in Volkov's administrative office. And I need you to tell me right now what it authorized. The silence that followed was the specific kind that tells you the answer is going to be bad. Cargo scheduling, he said finally. It authorized specific cargo windows at the Incheon terminal. What cargo? He didn't answer. Tae-jin. Her voice didn't break. She made sure of it. What cargo? At the time of signing, I believed it was contraband goods, electronics, pharmaceuticals. Not, he stopped again, not people. At the time of signing, yes. And when did you find out what was actually moving through those windows? Another silence, longer this time. 8 months ago, he said. 8 months. She had arrived in Seoul 3 weeks ago. The authorization document in Volkov's room was dated 2 years prior. 8 months ago, Kwon Tae-jin had learned that his signed authorization was being used to move human beings through his port, and he had not closed it down, had not terminated the arrangement, had not gone to any authority, had sat with it for 8 months, while the organization tracking Volkov spent 14 months trying to build a case from the outside. She stood up. "My son," she said, "is in a building surrounded by your people. Zuri, he is in that building because I trusted you." Her voice cracked on the last word. Once. She sealed it back. "I trusted you, and you have a signed document authorizing Volkov's trafficking operation under your name. I did not know it was trafficking, but you knew 8 months ago, and you did nothing." He stood. "I was trying to... What? Manage it? From inside? While children were being moved through your port?" She picked up her phone. "I am going to get my son out of your safe house. Right now. Tonight. And then I am going today with the Seoul DA's office and with Interpol, and I am going to let the legal system do what I was hired to do." She looked at him. "Do not send anyone to stop me. I would never... I don't know what you would never do anymore." She walked toward the door, stopped with her hand on it. "I'm going to ask you one thing, and I need you to answer it honestly. Not organizationally, not complicatedly, honestly." She turned. "Is Micah safe right now?" He looked at her across the small room, across the table set for two, across the entirety of what had just broken between them. "Yes," he said. "My people answer to me. Not to Volkov. Not to Sung-ho. To me. Micah is safe." She looked at his face. She had been looking at his face for weeks, in airport lounges and park benches and cheap lunch spots and coffee shops, trying to find the young man she had known and the criminal he had become, and some workable understanding of how both could be true at once. She found neither right now. She found only a man standing in a private room above the Han River, looking at her with the expression of someone who has arrived at the moment they have been running from and has run out of road. She left. She was 3 blocks from the restaurant when her phone rang. Micah's school number. She answered immediately. "Hello?" "Miss Coleman." A woman's voice, tight, controlled. "This is Principal Ha at Eunpyeong Elementary. I'm calling because we received a message through our parent communication system a few moments ago that you were coming to collect Micah early and that he should be released to..." "Don't release him to anyone," Zuri said, her voice gone flat and cold. "No one. Lock down if you have to. I'm coming right now." Miss Coleman, he's not here. The street noise continued around her. A bus passing, someone's phone, ordinary sounds. What did you say? Micah left 20 minutes ago with the woman who brought the authorization note. A pause. Miss Coleman? She had documentation. Your organization's letterhead. It looked. Zuri was already running. She called Tae-jin before she hit the end of the block. He answered on the first ring. They took him, she said. Her voice was someone else's voice, coming from very far away. Tae-jin, they took Micah. The sound on his end changed. Whatever room he was in, whatever careful register he had been maintaining, all of it gone. What was left was something that sounded nothing like a businessman and nothing like an apology and everything like a man who has just been told his son is gone. I'm coming to you, he said. Don't stop moving. Which direction are you? He told Micah that his father sent them, she said. Her voice broke on that. She let it break because there was nothing left to hold it. Whoever took him, they told my son that his father sent them. Silence for 1 second. Then, I'm coming. She kept running. Tae-jin reached her in 6 minutes. The black sedan came around the corner at a speed that suggested traffic laws were a suggestion rather than a rule, and it stopped hard at the curb beside her. The door opened before the car fully stopped, and Tae-jin stepped out and looked at her face and then looked at the street around them with the specific rapid assessment of a man cataloging threats. Get in, he said. She got in. The car was already moving before the door closed. 2 other vehicles fell in behind them. She could see them in the side mirror, dark and close, materializing out of the evening traffic with the practiced geometry of people who do this regularly. The man driving was not Yuna. He was larger, older, and he was navigating through Seoul with both hands tight on the wheel and his jaw set. Tae-jin was on his phone, speaking Korean, fast and low, the cadence of someone issuing instructions to multiple people simultaneously. She caught fragments: warehouse district, Incheon corridor, the word for photographs, the word for confirm. His free hand was on the seat beside him, not touching her, but close. She noticed that. She didn't know what to do with it. She called the school again. Principal Ha answered on the second ring and confirmed again. 20 minutes ago, a woman with documentation, Micah had gone willingly because the documentation said his mother sent her. He hadn't fought. Of course he hadn't fought. He was 9 years old and someone had handed him a piece of paper with his mother's organization's letterhead on it and told him it was fine. Zuri hung up. Her hands were in her lap. She made them stay there. Talk to me, she said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. Tae-jin lowered the phone. My people are running the traffic camera network on the Eun-pyeong-mapo corridor. The vehicle that picked Micah up was a black commercial van, plates registered to a cleaning company in Bupyeong that shut down 8 months ago. Volkov's people. Almost certainly. How did they know about the school? We moved Micah to the safe house. We didn't change his school. I was quiet for a moment. She watched the silence arrive and understood it. Sung-ho, she said. He said nothing. Your man Sung-ho gave them Micah's school, she said. Not a question anymore. The photograph in Volkov's administrative room. The positioning of a man who had been inside that operation since before Tae-jin took the organization. My father's man before he was mine. He's been feeding them information. I don't know yet what he gave them. You need to find out. I'm aware of that. His voice was controlled, but she could hear what was underneath it. The particular sound of a man who has been betrayed by someone he trusted absolutely and has not yet had time to process the size of it. Sung-ho is not currently reachable. She absorbed that. He's gone. He's not answering. That is not the same thing. Yet. She turned and looked out the window. They were moving south toward the river, and Seoul at night was all lit windows and bridges, and the Han cutting black through the middle of it. Beautiful and completely indifferent to the fact that somewhere in it, her son was frightened and had probably been told things designed to make him distrust the only person he absolutely trusted. His father sent them. She pressed her knuckles against her mouth and breathed through it. He'll be scared, she said. Not to Tae-jin specifically. To the night outside the window. He doesn't understand what's happening, and they told him... She stopped. I heard you. Tae-jin's voice had changed, stripped back to something without management or strategy in it. I heard what you said on the phone. Then you understand why we are going to find him right now. Yes. And when we find him... She turned from the window. Whatever you have to do, Whatever resources, whatever methods, whatever the Quan Syndicate is or isn't supposed to do, I don't care. Do you understand me? I don't care about any of it. He looked at her. In the moving dark of the car, his face was very clear. I know. Get my son back. I will. She believed him. That was the thing she couldn't rationalize away. After the photograph and the authorization document, and Park Sung-ho standing in Volkov's room, after all of it, she was sitting in this car and listening to his voice, and she believed him. She was furious at herself for it, and she did it anyway because there was no alternative that made Micah safer, and she was out of the luxury of clean choices. The driver's phone made a sound. He said one sentence in Korean. Tae-jin straightened. They found the van, Incheon direction. Traffic camera near the Gyeong interchange 18 minutes ago. Incheon. She thought about the Volkov file. Primary operation routes through a logistics facility near Incheon, the warehouse district by the port. The documentation she had spent 2 weeks trying to build a legal case around. He's taking Micah to the port. That's my read. Then drive faster. 3 calls happened in the next 40 minutes, each one building on the previous, and by the time the convoy crossed into Incheon proper, the Quan Syndicate had activated something. Zuri had no framework to fully understand, a network of people and information that moved through the city's structures the way water moves through cracks, finding paths that official channels didn't have and couldn't use. Dock workers who owed the organization. Port authority contacts with flexible ethics. Informants in Volkov's distribution network who had been quiet for months and were now, under the particular pressure that the Quan name generated when applied with intent, suddenly very willing to talk. By 10:15 p.m., they had an address. Abandoned warehouse, Pier District, the kind of building that exists because nobody has yet decided what to do with it. The structure had been used by Volkov's organization as a transit point, a holding location between acquisitions and transport. The case file had mentioned it as a possibility. The case file had also noted that without actionable intelligence pinning specific activity to specific coordinates on a specific date, a legal approach would take weeks minimum. They did not have weeks. They had, according to Tae-jin's port informant, a narrow window before Volkov's operation moved Micah to a second location pending leverage negotiations with Zuri. She understood what that meant. He was being held as a hostage for her case files and her departure from Korea, not for ransom. Which meant Volkov needed him functional and frightened, not harmed. Which meant they probably had time. Probably. Tae-jin pulled her aside when the convoy stopped 2 blocks from the warehouse. The other vehicles had arranged themselves at points she couldn't fully see. Men had gotten out quietly. The street was dark and smelled like salt water and diesel, and the distant industrial sound of the port working its night shifts without caring about anything happening on its edges. You stay here, he said. She looked at him. I'm serious, Zuri. There are going to be armed men inside that building, and I cannot... He stopped, started again. I cannot manage what's in there and worry about you at the same time. I need to know you're behind cover, and I need to not think about you. And if something goes wrong, Yuna is in the car behind you. She doesn't leave you. He looked at her steadily. The moment Micah is out, he comes straight to you. That is the priority. My people know that. She looked at his face. In the dark, in the Incheon Pier district, with the sound of his men moving at the edges of her hearing, she looked at his face and saw something she recognized. Not from the airport or the park or the restaurants. From 10 years before that. From the roof of the student housing building in Nairobi, watching city lights. The look of someone who is about to do something they understand is dangerous and is not going to stop. Be careful, she said. He held her gaze for one more second. Stay with Yuna. He turned and walked toward the warehouse. She watched him go. The warehouse had 4 entry points and Tae-jin's men took 3 of them simultaneously. She knew this afterward, not in the moment. In the moment, she was in the back seat of the second car with Yuna in the front, and the windows showing her nothing but a dark building and the silhouettes of men positioning and then disappearing, and then a period of waiting that was the most brutal thing she had experienced in her adult life. She counted her own heartbeats. She got to 43 before she lost count and started again. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered it before the second ring. Ms. Coleman. The voice was Russian-accented, unhurried, the voice of someone who has decided to be patient, because patience is a weapon. I thought we should speak directly. Her hand tightened on the phone. Volkov. You've been very persistent. I admire that in a lawyer. It's less useful when you're investigating me, but admirable. She kept her voice flat, gave him nothing in the sound of her. Where's my son? Comfortable. Watching something on a tablet. He asked for food and we provided it. A slight pause. He's a very self-possessed child. You've done well. Put him on. In a moment, I want to establish something first. His voice didn't change register. It had the quality of someone reading from a document they've read many times. You have evidence. I understand that. What I want you to understand is that evidence has a shelf life. Files can be corrupted. Witnesses can change their minds. And the prosecutor's office in Seoul has many competing priorities. You're threatening me. I'm offering you a transaction. Your evidence, your withdrawal from this case, your departure from Korea within 72 hours. In exchange for your son returned safely tonight, and a guarantee that your organization's staff will not be inconvenienced going forward. Another pause. It's a reasonable offer, Ms. Coleman. And if I don't take it? The silence on the other end had a different quality. She had been in enough adversarial negotiations to know the difference between a thinking silence and a performance one. This was performance. He had already decided what the answer was. He was letting her sit in the gap to make the threat feel real. I think you'll take it, he said. You seem like someone who knows when a situation is changed. Put my son on the phone. A shuffle. A sound she recognized, the particular half-breath of a child trying very hard not to cry. Mom? Everything in her chest collapsed and rebuilt in the same second. Hey, baby. Hey, I'm here. Mom, His voice wobbled. He steadied it. 9 years old and steadying his voice for her. I didn't go with them because I wanted to. I want you to know that. I know, Micah, I know that. They said, Dad. He stopped. They said, I know what they said. She kept her voice even, calm. The way you keep your voice when you are performing calm for someone who needs it. It's not true. Do you hear me? Whatever they told you, it's not true. Dad did not send them. A pause. Is Jay my dad? She closed her eyes. Yes. I thought so. Another pause, and in it she could hear him processing this, the way he processed everything. Seriously, systematically, with the gravity of a person who would rather have the truth than a comfortable version of it. He seemed like he was. He's coming for you right now, she said. He's coming, and I need you to be patient and stay where you are and not do anything brave. Can you do that? Okay. A small sound. Mom? Yeah. Tell him to hurry. The phone was taken back. Volkov's voice again. Touching. Now. My offer. Give me 12 hours to pull the files and make arrangements to leave, she said. Her voice was steady. I can't do it in less. 8 hours. 10. 9, he said. And Miss Coleman, I trust you understand that any activity in the vicinity of the warehouse where your son is being kept would end this transaction immediately and badly. Tell your companion that. He hung up. Yuna was looking at her in the rear-view mirror. Had clearly heard enough. Zuri said, How do I reach Tae-jin right now? I can relay. Tell him Volkov just called me. He knows we're here. Tell him... She stopped. Thought. Tell him Volkov said any activity near the warehouse ends it badly. Tell him that's exactly what Volkov said, and that I need him to know it before he does anything. Yuna relayed. 30 seconds of silence. Then Yuna said, Mr. Kwan says he has a different read on the situation. What does that mean? He says Volkov telling you he knows we're here means Volkov is trying to slow us down. If he were confident in his position, he wouldn't have called. She paused, listening. Mr. Kwan says the call was buying time. He says we don't give it to him. Zuri sat with that for 5 seconds. Then, tell him Micah said to hurry. What happened in the warehouse took 23 minutes. She measured it afterward in the silences between sounds. There were sounds, muffled by distance and the building's walls. And she sat in the car and listened to them and did not look away from the building's entrance. Yuna stayed in the front seat and did not offer reassurance and did not perform calm, and that was somehow the most useful thing anyone could have done. Just presence, just another person breathing in the same space. At minute 7, 3 of Tae-jin's men came out of the east entrance moving fast and repositioned. She didn't know what that meant. At minute 14, there was a period of silence that was worse than the sounds had been. At minute 19, her phone buzzed, a text from Tae-jin's number. "We have him." Coming out the main entrance, 60 seconds. Her hand was on the door handle before she finished reading it. Yuna said, "Ms. Coleman." She was already out of the car. The air hit her, cold, salt-heavy, the industrial smell of the port at night. She was standing on the cracked asphalt outside the building when the main entrance opened and men came through it, and in the middle of them, slightly shorter than everyone around him, wrapped inside Tae-jin's jacket, because apparently at some point it had been removed and used for this specific purpose, was Micah. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. He came toward her at a run, and she went toward him and they met in the middle of the asphalt, and he hit her hard enough that she staggered back a step, and she held on with both arms and her face against the top of his head, and she breathed him in. The specific smell of her son, shampoo, and the jacket that wasn't his, and the salt air. And she held him with the entirety of her strength and let it be over. "I'm okay," he said into her shoulder, muffled, fierce. "Mom, I'm okay." "I know. They gave me a really bad sandwich," she laughed. "It came out wrong, shaky, too wet at the edges. But it was a laugh. I'll make you something when we get home. Can we go home?" "Yes." She pulled back enough to look at his face. He had been crying. The evidence was there, dried on his cheeks. And he had the expression of someone who had been scared out of his mind and was now wrapping it in practicality because that was how he was built. She wiped his face with her thumb. "We're going home." Tae-jin was standing 8 feet away. He was not in good condition. His shirt was torn at the collar, and there was blood on the side of his face. Not pouring, already clotting, but real and dark. And he was breathing with the particular deliberateness of someone managing pain they're not going to acknowledge. He had his arms at his sides, and he was looking at Micah with an expression so unguarded it looked like it hurt. Micah turned and saw him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Micah said, very simply, "Dad." Something in Tae-jin's face broke. It happened the way things break that have been held under pressure for a long time. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the way of a controlled structure that has finally used up its structural integrity. He pressed his mouth together hard, closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, he crossed the distance and crouched down and put his hand on the back of Micah's head and held him against his shoulder and breathed, just breathed. Micah let him, with the matter-of-fact acceptance of a child who has decided something and doesn't need to make a production of it. Zuri stood on the asphalt in the cold Incheon air and watched the two of them and did not try to manage what was happening in her chest. There was no point. They drove back to Seoul in the convoy, Micah asleep between them in the back seat before they reached the expressway. The deep, instant sleep of a child whose body has been running on adrenaline for hours and has now decided to collect what it's owed. His head was against Zuri's arm. His feet were toward Tae-jin's side of the seat, and one of his soccer cleats had come half off. Tae-jin sat with his elbow against the window and the Incheon port receding behind them and blood drying on his face that he had refused to let anyone look at. They rode in silence for a long time. Then Zuri said quietly, "Volkov." "His people are contained," Tae-jin said. "The warehouse operation is finished." "Contained how?" "The men who took Micah are in the custody of my organization. Evidence of their activities, including documentation connecting Volkov to the warehouse, has been packaged and will be delivered to the Seoul DA's office and to Interpol contacts before morning." She looked at him. "You're handing them over." "Volkov moves through my port," he said. "That ends tonight." "And the authorization document? Your reference code on Volkov's table?" He was quiet for a moment. "That document and its chain of authorization are included in the package to the DA, including Sung-ho's signature on the supplementary agreements." A pause. "Sung-ho has been located." "Where is he?" "In a room having a conversation he should have had 8 months ago when I needed to know what he knew." His voice was flat. Not cruel, just very, very tired. "He will cooperate with the legal investigation." "Because you're making him." "Because he doesn't have another option." She looked at Micah's sleeping face, the crease his cheek was making against her sleeve. "The authorization document implicates you." "It does." "The DA's office is going to have questions about Kwan logistics." "Yes." "You could have left that document out of the package." "I know." She studied his profile, the dried blood. The way he was looking out the window with the focused emptiness of a man doing a very hard kind of arithmetic. Why didn't you? He turned from the window, looked at her directly, which he hadn't done since the warehouse entrance. Because you were right, he said, in the coffee shop. When you pushed me about what moved through those cargo windows. He paused. I knew 8 months ago. I should have ended it 8 months ago. The fact that I didn't. He stopped. There are things I can't undo, but I can stop building on top of them. The car moved through the night. Sol's lights were beginning to appear at the edges of the darkness ahead. Micah stirred, murmured something, settled again. He asked me if you were his dad, Zuri said, on the phone, when Volkov let him talk to me. Tae-jin said nothing. I told him yes. I heard you say that. I told him you were coming for him. She paused. I told him you didn't send those people, that what they told him wasn't true. Thank you. It was the truth. Yes. He looked down at Micah's feet, at the half-off cleat. He reached over carefully and settled it back onto the boy's heel without waking him. The gesture was so precise and so gentle and so completely at odds with everything else about the last 3 hours that Zuri had to look away. In the warehouse, she said, the blood on your face. It's fine. That's not what I asked. He touched the side of his head with 2 fingers, assessed. One of Volkov's men had a length of pipe. He got 1 swing before my people got to him. A pause. I've had worse. I imagine you have. It won't scar. I don't care about the scar. She heard herself say it and didn't retract it. It was true. She didn't care about the scar. She cared that he was sitting in a car in one piece and Micah was asleep beside her in one piece, and whatever she was going to do with all of this, the fury, the betrayal of the document, the 8 months, Sung-ho, the entire complicated catastrophic architecture of what Tae-jin was. She was going to do it later, when her son was safe in a bed and she had room to breathe. Tae-jin. Yes, after tonight, after Micah is settled, and the DA has the package and the investigation moves forward, we're going to have a very long conversation. I know. Not about us, she said, about what your organization does, about what changes and what gets documented, and what the boundaries are going to be if you want to be in our lives. Those are going to be my terms. Non-negotiable. He was quiet for a moment. Okay. You agreed very quickly. I'm not going to negotiate against my son's well-being. He said it without drama, just as a statement of position. Whatever terms you set. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Micah, sleeping with his cheek against her arm, the city getting closer through the windows. He's going to want to know everything, she said. When he's older, he's going to ask the hard questions. I know. You'll have to tell him true things. I know that too. He won't always like the answers. No. Tae-jin looked at his son. The kind of look that has no performance in it, no construction, just the raw and slightly wrecked attention of a man who has been given something he thought was permanently gone and cannot yet believe the weight of it. But I'll be there to answer them. That's different from not being there. The convoy entered Seoul. Micah slept. Zuri sat with her son against her arm, and the man across the seat from her and the city coming up around the car. And she thought about evidence and documentation and the difference between what can be filed with a court clerk and what cannot. She thought about 10 years and a December birthday and a water bottle rolling across marble in an airport. She thought about the question he'd asked her across a crowded lounge and how she hadn't answered it yet. Do you still remember me? The car pulled up outside the apartment building. Tae-jin leaned over carefully and lifted Micah, not asking, just doing it, gathering the boy against his chest with the unpracticed but instinctive competence of someone whose body knows this is right, even when the situation around it is not, and carried him toward the building. Zuri got out of the car, stood in the cold air for a moment, then she followed them inside. Behind them, at the edge of the light, a man stepped out of a doorway across the street. He was not one of Tae-jin's men. He looked at the building's entrance for a moment with the specific quality of someone filing information. Then he put his phone to his ear and began to speak. The man across the street made 3 calls. Zuri did not know about the first 2. She found out about the third one 40 minutes later, when she was sitting at the kitchen table of the Eunpyeong apartment with a cup of tea going cold in front of her, and Micah finally down in the bedroom, and Tae-jin came out of the bathroom with the cut on his face cleaned and taped and a look in his eyes that had nothing to do with the warehouse. He set his phone on the table, sat down across from her. "We have a problem," he said. She looked at him. "Define problem." "The man outside your building tonight, he's been identified." He turned the phone so she could see the screen. A photograph. Security camera, street level, the man mid-stride, with his face half visible. His name is Dmitry Kassin. He works for Volkov's financial operation. Not the street side, the legal side. Volkov has a legal side. Every organization of that size has a legal side. Lawyers, accountants, people who exist to manage what happens when the operational side makes mistakes. He pulled the phone back. Kassin's specific function is documentation, evidence management. She understood immediately. He was sent to confirm Micah's location. He was sent to confirm all our locations. Tae-jin's voice was level. The operational register, the one that stripped everything unnecessary out. Volkov's warehouse is gone. His transit operation is exposed. The DA package goes out at 6 a.m. What Volkov has left is leverage, and the only leverage he has left is the fact that we have a child. Micah. And you. He paused. And the fact that if he can make you disappear before the DA package lands, or make the package disappear, the case collapses and he has room to rebuild. She sat with the cup of cold tea between her hands. How long do we have? Before what specifically? Before he decides that the transaction he offered me on the phone is no longer worth offering. Tae-jin looked at her directly. That's the wrong question. Then what's the right one? The right question is whether we let him choose the timeline. He put both hands flat on the table. His knuckles were bruised. She could see that now in the apartment light, the marks of the warehouse on him. The DA package goes out at 6 a.m. It's currently 11:40. That's 6 hours and 20 minutes. If the package lands with the correct contacts and the correct documentation before Volkov can intercept it or compromise it, his leverage disappears. 6 hours. Yes. And Kassin's call. Means Volkov knows where we are and is deciding what to do with that knowledge. He kept his eyes on her. I've moved additional people to this building's perimeter. We are not unprotected. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Ask. The DA package, the complete version, the one that includes the authorization document with my reference code. Do you want to send it? She looked at him. You're asking me if I want to send the evidence that implicates you. I'm asking if you've decided. He said it without flinching. Because if you send it, the DA's office is going to look at Quan logistics. They're going to find things. Some of them will be manageable. Some of them will not. A pause. I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking where you are. She thought about Ferris, about the complaint filed against her, about Source A, who had walked out of protective housing and had not been found. About the organization had spent trying to build a case through legal channels, while Volkov's network quietly neutralized everything that got close. She thought about a document on a table in a room in Volkov's property, KTJ 2024-11. She thought about Micah in the next room, asleep, with his soccer cleat half off. Send the package, she said. Something in Tae-jin's expression settled. Not relief. Something more complicated than relief. All of it. All of it, she said. Including your reference code. Including Sung-ho's supplementary signatures. Including the cargo window authorization. She kept her voice even. You said you were going to stop building on top of things you can't undo. This is what that looks like. He picked up the phone, made 2 calls in Korean, short and precise. Then he set it back down. It's being sent now, he said. Simultaneous delivery to the Seoul DA's primary contact, the secondary contact, and the Interpol liaison your organization has been using. With a copy to Dr. Ferris at a personal address she'll access when she wakes up. Volkov can't suppress all of those simultaneously. No. Then it's done. It's done. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table in the Eunpyeong apartment with the city quiet outside, and the package moving through secure channels to people who would read it in the morning with coffee and then make calls that would take Mikhail Volkov's remaining operational infrastructure apart piece by piece. And the silence between them was the particular silence of 2 people who have just made an irreversible decision together and are sitting in the weight of it. Tae-jin. Yes. The next 6 hours. I'll stay, he said. If you'll let me. She looked at her cold tea, then at him. I wasn't going to ask you to leave. Kassin made his decision at 2:47 a.m. She knew this because Tae-jin got a text at 2:48, stood up from the couch where he'd been sitting with his phone and his thoughts, and went to the window. He looked down at the street for 30 seconds. Then he turned. "They're moving," he said. "How many?" "4 vehicles. Volkov's pulling what he has left." He was already on the phone, the operational register fully locked in now, all the other registers gone. "He's not coming for Micah. He's going for the DA contacts. If he can reach the right people in the next 2 hours before the office opens." "Can he?" Tae-jin was speaking to someone else. She caught the words. 3 names, 2 locations, the word intercept used twice. Then, "My people are already between Volkov's vehicles and both DA contacts, and the Interpol liaison has a separate team." She stood up. "What do you need from me?" He looked at her. "Nothing right now. My people handle this. You stay with Micah." "Is it going to be enough?" "Yes." He said it without qualification. "By morning, Volkov's people will be in Seoul Metropolitan Police custody, or they will be gone from this city. Either outcome ends his operational capacity here. And Volkov himself is not in Seoul tonight." He met her eyes. "He runs from a distance. That's how he survived this long. Tonight he's watching his Seoul network get dismantled from somewhere very far away, and when the DA's office opens in 4 hours, he will know that the legal net around him has moved past the point he can manage." She absorbed this. He'll disappear. He'll try. And Interpol has an active file that is about to become significantly more active. He paused. "It won't be clean. It won't be fast. The legal process never is, but his capacity to operate in Korea, to use this port, to move through these logistics channels, to reach into this city and threaten anyone connected to me or to your case, that ends tonight." She stood in the kitchen of the safe house in the middle of the night and looked at the man across the room and thought about the difference between the legal system and what Tae-jin could do that the legal system couldn't. She had spent her entire career in the belief that the first was the only legitimate answer. She still believed that. She was also standing in an apartment that was currently surrounded by his people, while his network ran interference between Volkov's last operational assets and the evidence package that would bring him down. And she was honest enough with herself to hold both things at once. "Go," she said. "Do what you need to do." He went. She sat down on the couch and listened to the city and watched the door to Micah's room and waited for morning. At 6:17 a.m., Dr. Lena Ferris called. She had accessed her personal email at 6:04. She had spent 13 minutes reading. Her voice on the phone was the voice of a woman who has just had a significant restructuring of her understanding of a situation. "I've read it," Ferris said. "All of it?" "The DA contacts have confirmed receipt, both of them." A pause. "The Interpol liaison called me directly at 6:10. They're moving." Another pause, longer. "Zuri, the Quan authorization document. I know. This is going to open a separate investigation. I know that too. Are you—" Ferris stopped. "Are you prepared for what that means? For your position here? If the organization becomes associated with evidence that implicates a major Korean crime figure, if the press gets the connection between you and Quan, I'm the attorney who built the case that brought down Volkov's trafficking operation," Zuri said. "I'm prepared to defend that. And your personal relationship with Tae-jin." She was quiet for a moment. "That's not part of the case file. It will become part of the conversation." "I know." She looked at Micah's bedroom door. "I'm prepared for that too." Ferris was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, the professional register had softened into something more human underneath. "Source A has been located. She reached out through a secondary channel last night. She's in Busan. She's willing to testify." Apparently, whatever happened last night clarified her sense of what was possible. Zuri closed her eyes. "Good. The complaint against you has been reviewed and withdrawn. Whoever filed it no longer has the organizational backing to sustain it." A pause. "Someone cleaned that up very efficiently overnight." "I expect they did." "Zuri." The softness again. "Are you all right? You and Micah?" She sat on the couch in the apartment that Tae-jin's organization had provided and thought about that question with the honesty it deserved. She was not all right in the sense of undamaged. She was not all right in the sense of knowing clearly what came next. She was all right in the sense of her son being asleep in the next room, and the evidence being in the right hands and the 6 hours of the night being behind her rather than in front of her. "We're okay," she said. "I'll be in the office this afternoon." Oh. Micah woke up at 8:15 and wanted jjajangmyeon, not toast, not cereal, not the rice and egg that Zuri was capable of making with reasonable competence. Jjajangmyeon, specifically, with the handmade noodles, and the delivery version would not satisfy because he had now had the original and was apparently ruined for all inferior versions. "It's 8 in the morning," Zuri said. "Noodles don't have a time." "That's not true." He fixed her with the look that meant he had thought about this more than she had, and she was going to lose the argument. "In Korea, it's culturally acceptable to eat noodles for breakfast." "I read that." "Where did you read that?" "On the internet." "When were you on the internet?" "Last night. Before—" He stopped. His face shifted, the morning ease of a child moving through the previous night's territory carefully. He sat down at the kitchen table. "Is Jay here?" "No." "Is he coming?" She set down the mug she'd been holding, sat across from him, the way she'd sat across from Tae-jin a few hours before. "Micah, I need to talk to you about some things." He looked at her with the face of someone who has been expecting this conversation and has been quietly preparing for it. 9 years old and already bracing. She hated that she had raised a child who knew how to brace. "Jay is your father," she said. "His real name is Tae-jin. I knew him 10 years ago when we were both university students in Nairobi. He had to leave very suddenly, and we lost contact." She paused. "When I found out I was pregnant, I couldn't reach him. So I came home and I had you and I built our life." Micah was listening, not interrupting. Listening with the focused, grave attention that was one of his most exhausting and most admirable qualities. "He didn't know about you until 3 weeks ago," she said. "Not because he didn't want to know, because I couldn't find him, and he didn't know to look." She's kept her voice even, factual. Gave him the truth without dressing it up. "He's not a perfect person. His life is complicated in ways I'm still figuring out how to explain to you. But last night—" She stopped. "Last night he came for you. Whatever else is true about him, that is true." Micah was quiet for a moment, then, "The people who took me, did he stop them?" "Yes." "By himself?" "He had help." Micah absorbed this. "The men who are always around him." "Yes. I thought they were bodyguards." "Something like that." He looked at the table, traced a scratch in the surface with one finger. "Is he bad?" She sat with that question. It was the one she'd been sitting with for 3 weeks, dressed in different clothes each time. Is he bad? The 9-year-old version, clean and direct, without the qualifications. "He's done bad things," she said. "And he's done good things. He's a person who has a lot of power and has used it badly sometimes and is trying to use it better." She paused. "I'm not going to tell you he's perfect, but I don't think he's bad in the way that means you should be afraid of him." Micah looked up. "Are you afraid of him?" "No." "Were you?" She thought about the coffee shop, the authorization document, the moment on the Yoido sidewalk with the photograph of Micah on her phone. "I was scared of the situation," she said. "That's different." He considered this with the systematic gravity that was his natural mode. "Can I see him?" "Yes?" "If you want to." "I want to." He said it simply, without drama. "He came for me. That means something." She looked at her son. The crooked mouth and the eyes and the gravity, all of it, mapped from the man who had sat across from her at this table a few hours ago. Biology was a relentless thing. "It means something," she agreed. She made him rice and egg. He ate it without complaint, which told her more about his emotional state than anything he'd said, because a calm Micah was a child processing something large and needing the world to be predictable while he did it. She let the morning be quiet, let the apartment hold them. At 10:30, Tae-jin knocked on the door. She had expected a call first. He knocked instead, 3 times. The way you knock when you're not sure you're welcome and are announcing yourself rather than presuming. She opened the door, and he was standing in the hallway, looking like a man who had not slept, and was holding a paper bag from the jjajangmyeon place in Mappo, and had the expression of someone who is not certain this was the right call but made it anyway. She looked at the bag. "Micah texted you," she said. "He has my number from the Safe House tablet." A pause. "I should have checked what he was doing on that tablet." "Yes, she said. You should have. She stepped back from the door. He came in. The conversation she had promised him, the long one, the non-negotiable terms one, happened that afternoon, after Micah had eaten his noodles and watched something on the tablet and fallen asleep again in the bedroom with the boneless completeness of a child reclaiming sleep debt, and after Tae-jin had sat at the kitchen table and watched his son eat with the look of a man who is cataloging details to keep. They sat on opposite sides of the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee between them, and she put her hands flat on the surface and looked at him and started. She went through it methodically. Not with anger. The anger had burned through in the coffee shop and on the Yoido sidewalk and at the restaurant above the river, and what was left on the other side of it was something more durable and more useful. She was a lawyer. She built cases. She laid out terms. Children were untouchable, not as policy, not as preference, as an absolute. No operation under the Kwon Syndicate name would involve, endanger, facilitate harm to, or derive profit from any person under the age of 18. Any person under his organization who violated this faced immediate removal and exposure. Human trafficking was finished in Kwon territory. Not reduced, not redirected. Finished. Any organization that moved people through his port, his logistics infrastructure, his networks, was an enemy of the Kwon Syndicate and would be treated accordingly. The DA investigation into the authorization document would proceed without interference. Tae-jin would not obstruct, redirect, or apply pressure to any prosecutorial process arising from the evidence package. If it cost him operationally, that was the cost. Sung-ho would cooperate fully with the legal investigation. Whatever Tae-jin's private feelings about the man's betrayal, and she had no doubt those feelings were significant and would be dealt with in ways she was choosing not to know about, the legal cooperation was non-negotiable. And finally, Micah. Micah would be told the truth about his father in age-appropriate increments as he grew. He would not be managed or protected into ignorance. When he was old enough to ask real questions, he would get real answers. And if at any point the life Tae-jin led became an active threat to their son, if the Kwon Syndicate's activities put Micah in danger again, she would take Micah and she would leave and Tae-jin would not follow. She said all of it clearly, without raising her voice, looking at him across the table. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Okay, he said. I need more than okay. I know. He looked at his coffee, then at her. The children, the trafficking, the DA investigation, Sung-ho. He said each one like he was signing something. Yes. To all of it, yes, yes, without qualification. And Micah. And Micah. His voice changed on that one, stripped of the operational register entirely. Zuri. I missed 9 years of his life because of a set of circumstances I will spend a long time being honest with myself about. I am not going to spend the next 9 missing him because I was too proud to accept terms. He paused. He's mine. That means everything's about how I conduct my life is now measured against what kind of father it makes me. I understand that. She looked at him for a long time, at the taped cut on his face and the bruised knuckles and the exhaustion that was sitting in him. The way it sits in people who have been running on something other than sleep for too long. She thought about the young man in Nairobi who had sat on a rooftop and watched city lights and hadn't needed to fill silence. She thought about the man in the airport who had looked at his son's face and gone very still. She thought about him crossing the lounge with his security detail frozen behind him and his face doing the thing it had been doing ever since, that wrecked, honest, unmanaged thing. She thought about the authorization document. The 8 months, Sung-ho. The cargo windows. Both things. At the same time. Not reconciled. She wasn't there yet, might not be for a long time. But held simultaneously, the way you hold complicated truths when you've decided that simple ones aren't available. The ring in Nairobi, she said. He went very still. You told me once, before you left. You said you'd found something you wanted to show me. She hadn't thought about it in years, and then had thought about it with the specific regularity of things you think about when you don't mean to. I thought you meant a place, a viewpoint somewhere. He looked at her. His right hand moved slightly, not a gesture, more the beginning of one that he stopped. It wasn't a viewpoint. No. I bought it at the market near the university, the one near the North Gate. His voice was quiet, very quiet. Silver, simple. I was 23 and I had about $40 to my name and I spent 17 of them on it. Tae-jin. I still have it. She sat with that. He still has it. 10 years of violence and power and an empire built on things she was still learning the full shape of, and he had carried a $17 silver ring from a Nairobi market through all of it. That's either very romantic, she said, or a sign of profoundly unhealthy attachment. Something cracked in his face. Not the wrecked thing, something lighter. Possibly both. Probably both, she agreed. He reached into his jacket pocket, set it on the table between them. Small, plain, silver, with the particular patina of something that has been carried close to a person for a decade. It looked exactly like what it was. Something bought by a 23-year-old with limited funds who wanted to ask a question. She looked at it on the table. "I'm not going to ask you now," he said. "That's not what this is. I know where we are and where we aren't." He held her gaze steadily. "I just wanted you to see that I didn't leave it behind. Whatever else I did, that I didn't leave behind." She reached across the table. She picked up the ring, turned it in her fingers, set it back down. Then she pushed it across the table to him. "Keep it," she said, "for now." He looked at her face, reading it the way he read everything, carefully, without rushing to a conclusion. And then he picked up the ring and put it back in his pocket. "For now," he said. 6 months moved the way time moves when it is full of work. The DA investigation into Quan Logistics Group opened in April and ran through the summer. It was not clean or fast. She had told him it wouldn't be, and she had been right. Depositions, document production, 3 separate hearings where the Quan Syndicate's relationship to the Incheon port infrastructure was examined in the precise, grinding detail of a legal process that has no interest in anyone's personal narrative. Tae-jin's legal team cooperated at every stage. The authorization document was entered into evidence. Sung-ho testified under a cooperation agreement that took 6 weeks to negotiate. Tae-jin was not charged. The authorization document established organizational negligence, but not criminal intent at his level. The cargo window authorization had been executed under information he could demonstrate was deliberately manipulated by Sung-ho. It was not a vindication. It was not supposed to be. What it was, a finding that stopped short of prosecution while imposing significant compliance requirements on Quan Logistics Group's port operations going forward. He accepted the requirements without comment. Volkov was located in Budapest in May. The Interpol file, now substantially enriched by the evidence package and by Source A's testimony, delivered in a Seoul courthouse, with a thoroughness that made the prosecutor cry, resulted in an international arrest warrant that took another 2 months to execute. Mikhail Volkov was extradited to Korea in August and was photographed being walked through Incheon's international arrivals in handcuffs, which Zuri saw on her phone while eating lunch at her desk, and felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for a very long time. Dr. Ferris sent her a single text. "Well done." She sent back, "We're not done yet," because they weren't. Volkov's network had tendrils in 4 jurisdictions, and the prosecution was going to take years, and there was another case on her desk already, and another behind that, and the work had no endpoint. She had stopped expecting one. The work was the point. Micah started Taekwondo in April. Tae-jin taught him on Saturday mornings in a space in the Mappo building that had been cleared for the purpose, with mats on the floor and the particular serious patience of a man who knows this skill well enough to break it down to its smallest components. Micah was not a natural. He was too much in his head. He thought about the form while doing it, which meant he was always half a second behind his body. Tae-jin spent 3 weeks on that problem alone, finding different ways to say stop thinking and move until the version that worked for Micah specifically arrived and Micah stopped thinking and moved. Zuri watched the first session where it clicked, watched Micah execute a sequence and feel it land right, and look up with that expression of surprised accomplishment, and watched Tae-jin's face across the room, the particular quality of his attention, the way he said again with a calm that was the opposite of disappointment. He was not a natural father either. He got things wrong in the specific ways of someone who has no frame of reference. Too formal sometimes, too much inside his own head at others, occasionally so careful not to overstep that he understated himself in ways that confused Micah, who responded to directness. But he showed up every Saturday. I was there at the soccer tournament in May, and the school presentation in June, and the night in July when Micah had a fever and couldn't sleep, and Tae-jin sat in the chair beside his bed for 3 hours without being asked, reading something on his phone and being present in the room the way a person is present when they have decided that presence itself is the thing. He got better at it. That was the honest accounting. He was not immediately good at being a father, and he got better. Week by week, mistake by mistake, Saturday by Saturday, Zuri watched this happening. She watched it with the part of herself that was an attorney and measured evidence and drew conclusions from it, and with the other part, the part that had shared notes with a quiet Korean stranger in a Nairobi economics lecture and sat on a roof and watched city lights. And both parts arrived at the same conclusion, which was that he was trying in the way that counted, which was not the way that announced itself, but the way that simply kept showing up. In August, after the Volkov extradition, she came home to the apartment and found a single small package on the kitchen table. No card. She opened it. It was not the ring. It was a photograph. Framed, simple frame, the photograph taken by one of Tae-jin's people at the soccer tournament in May without her knowing. Micah mid-kick, fully focused, cleats off the ground. In the background, slightly out of focus but visible. Herself and Tae-jin, both watching, standing close enough that their shoulders were almost touching. She looked at it for a long time. She put it on the shelf in the living room where Micah could see it. The evening he asked was in September. They were standing on the roof of the Mapo building. She had learned by then that this was where he went when he needed to think. The same instinct she'd noticed in him in Nairobi, the reaching for height and open air. The city was below them, lit and loud and enormous in the way that cities are when you're above them. All the separate stories collapsed into light. Micah was inside. He had school in the morning and had negotiated a later bedtime by arguing that his body clock was still adjusting to seasonal change, which was not true, but was constructed well enough that Zuri had let it pass. She and Tae-jin were on the roof with the city below them, and Seoul in September going slightly cool at the edges of the night, and she was about to say something about the Volkov prosecution timeline when he turned toward her and she saw his face and stopped. Zuri. Yeah. He reached into his jacket pocket. She looked at the ring in his hand and then at his face. The cut on his face had healed. No scar, as he'd said, though there was a faint line if you looked for it in certain light. He looked tired in the way he often looked tired now, the tiredness of a man who is running an empire in one direction and a family in another and has decided both are worth the effort. He looked like himself. The complete version, the criminal and the father and the young man from Nairobi, and the man who had carried a $17 ring for 10 years, all present simultaneously, not reconciled into something cleaner, just all there. I told you I wasn't going to ask now, he said. Back in March. I said that. You did. I was wrong about the timing. He looked at the ring in his hand. I've been wrong about timing before. I'm trying to be less wrong about it. She looked at him, at the city behind him, at the ring. I'm not asking you to forgive everything, he said. I'm not asking you to simplify what I am. I know what I am. I know what my life is and what it isn't and what it costs. He paused. I'm asking you to let me keep showing up, the way I've been showing up, for you and for Micah, formally, permanently. His voice was quiet, rough at the edges. I'm asking you to let me come home. She stood on the roof in September with the city below her and the ring between them, and she thought about all the versions of this moment she could not have predicted from the airport lounge in March. She thought about evidence and documentation and the things that can be filed with a court clerk. She thought about the things that can't. She thought about her son downstairs using a fake circadian rhythm argument to stay up late, and about Saturdays in a Mapo training room, and about a photograph on a shelf in her living room. She thought about a roof in Nairobi, city lights, silence that didn't need filling. Yes, she said. He put the ring on her finger. His hands were not steady. She noticed that. She kept it. He pulled her in. She let him. They stood on the roof above Seoul with the city making its vast, continuous noise below them, and she put her forehead against his jaw and breathed, and he held her with his arms around her back and his face against her hair, and neither of them said anything for a long time, because there was nothing to say that the moment wasn't already saying. Below them, a window opened. Micah's voice, 9 years old and completely unapologetic. Are you guys kissing up there? Because my teacher says that kissing is actually just the transfer of, go to bed, Micah, they said. Together. Simultaneous. A pause. Was that synchronized? Bed. Okay. The sound of the window. Then just before it closed, It was synchronized. That's kind of amazing. The window shut. Tae-jin pulled back enough to look at her face. Something in his expression that she had seen building for months. The wrecked thing, the unguarded thing, fully present now, not managed. He looked like a man who has arrived somewhere he had given up expecting to arrive. He's going to be insufferable about this, Tae-jin said. He's going to be extraordinary, she said. He already is. He touched her face, his thumb against her cheekbone, the gesture from that September evening acquiring its history finally. Not a question anymore, but a fact, filed and settled. She covered his hand with hers and held it there. Below them, Seoul went on being Seoul. The Han River moved black and glittering through the middle of it. Somewhere in the city, the legal machinery was grinding through the Volkov case, month by patient month. Somewhere in the Kwan Syndicate's territory, organizations that preyed on children were being systematically removed from the map by a man who was feared for many reasons and was now adding a new one. She did not think Jin had become innocent. She did not think that was the story. The story was simpler and harder than that. The story was a man who had been given a second chance he hadn't expected and had decided, Saturday by Saturday, choice by choice, to be better than the version of himself that had existed before the airport. Not good in the clean sense, better in the ongoing sense, the kind of better that has to be chosen every day without the option of arriving at it permanently. She understood that kind of better. She had built her career on it. The belief that the gap between what was and what could be was worth working in, even when the gap was vast, even when the work was slow and the victories partial. They went downstairs. Micah was not in bed. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his tablet, which he tried to hide with the velocity of someone who was definitely not where he was supposed to be. Tae-jin looked at him. Micah looked at the ring on his mother's hand. His face did the thing, the crooked pull at the left side of his mouth, the lifted chin, the exact expression that had undone Tae-jin in an airport 8 months ago. So I'm getting a name change? We haven't discussed that, Zuri said. Micah Kwan Coleman, he said, trying it out. Or Coleman Kwan, the hyphen matters. I've read about this. Go to bed, Tae-jin said. I was just asking at bed, Micah. Micah picked up the tablet, entirely unbothered, and padded toward the bedroom. At the door he stopped, turned back, looked at both of them, at his mother and his father standing in the kitchen of an apartment that was going to be too small for this particular arrangement of people, with the assessing, serious, slightly crooked look of a child who has processed a very large amount of information over a very short period of time and has reached a conclusion. Okay, he said, simply, like it was settled, and went to bed. Zuri and Tae-jin stood in the kitchen. The apartment was quiet. The city outside continued without them. She looked at the ring on her finger, simple, silver, with 10 years of carrying worn into it. She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to.